Hey folks, how you doing? I'm working away here doing a re-edit of the Cairngorm Cycle video. That video was really long, at about 2 hours 20 minutes, with lots of sugary footage. So what I've done is I've condensed all the footage into something that's more viewable. I think I've got it down to about 12 minutes or maybe even less than that. But what I'm going to do to make the shortened video a little bit more interesting is, with the help of Mo, I'm going to show you the map, which I've got down on the floor here, and I'll trace out the route. So if you give me a wee hand with that, Mo, I'll show the folks where the cycle tour took me. So I parked the car here at the Linn of Dee car park, just along the road from Braemar there. And then I cycled down the road and I picked up this track here, which runs into Derry Lodge. And if you just bear with me a moment, folks, I'm going to change maps here. I'm going to switch to this map with Derry Lodge down here. And then I cycled through Glenderry, and this was all fairly reasonable cycling. And then I passed the junction in the track that leads up to the Hutchison Memorial Hut, the wee bothy just beneath Corryetchican there underneath Ben Macdui. But I carried on and I went through the Larrigan Lough, climbing to a height of about 750 metres thereabouts. So that was a really stiff climb over a boulder field with 2 or 3 river crossings. Then I cycled onwards down there, crossing, I managed to cycle a wee bit of that, and then another boulder field before eventually I got down to the Fords of Anne down here. It's marked as stepping stones, but they were well underwater when I was there, so I had to make the river crossing to get to the wee mountain refuge that's there. Not a bothy, it's just a wee shed actually, a wee wooden shed that is surrounded by big boulders. I camped beside the shed and I used the shelter in the morning to cook up my breakfast. Then in the morning I had my biggest day. I had a climb up through this glen here that was pretty bouldery, and then when I got up to the high point of the track there, I then had to cross the burn and then this rising traverse, and you can see how tightly packed the contours are there. So rising traverse up onto this broad shoulder here of Bainach Moor, and then round there, and then another fairly steep climb there. So from the refuge I had 3 climbs, 1, 2, 3 climbs to get up, and then across the northern shoulder of Bainach Moor, topping out at about 800 metres or thereabout. A nice easy cycle across there, and then a very steep descent, some of which I cycled, some of which I walked. And then I went round here, through the trees, and past Glenmore, if you know that area, Loch Morlich there. But I didn't cycle the road. There's an old logging route that goes to Aviemore. So I picked up the old logging route, which parallels the road for most of it, all the way along to Column Bridge, and then I picked up the road there, cycled a little bit. There's actually a little bit of a cycleway down on the south side of that road, until I got to here, this junction at Column Bridge, and then I followed this road here down to Feshy Bridge. So all that was fairly easy cycling. So it was a very difficult morning and a relatively easy afternoon. From there I cycled down this wee road that goes to Auckleen at the bottom in Glenfeshie, and now I need to change back to a different map again. So that's Auckleen there, so that's Glenfeshie with the River Feshie there, and then I cycled down here to the bothy. Now when I was cycling here, this was quite difficult in places because the Feshie flooded, a major flood some years ago, not that many years ago, and this part of the track, there were several parts really badly washed out, which involved taking my bike away into these trees and doing a loop round. And I think I mentioned in the first video that I got the bike pinned under a tree in the river, where I'd decided instead of doing a big loop around, a big bypass, I just jumped down and waded through the river a bit, but I had to pass my bike under a fallen tree and I managed to get it pinned. Didn't film any of that, but it was quite hard. I got to the bothy, spent a night in the bothy, then I was up and away early in the morning, continuing to follow the river Feshy right round here. Then I ran into problems of washout again as I was climbing up here, and in fact there was a couple of points where I just crossed over the river and I zigzagged back across and over the Feshy a couple of times, got my feet quite wet, but eventually came round here and into the narrowing glen, and I followed the track past this beautiful gorge with a waterfall in it, and up through here. There's a wee building there, but it's just a wee ruin, and then up and around this waterfall there's a bridge across this burn here, so I used the bridge, and then I came down here, and then it was contouring across all of this land here, and I mentioned that I had a grand view of the two hills, the two Munros, Cairngorm Fiddler and Anscoursug. When I got to here I could see that big bend in the river Feshy, and I could see the waters of the Geldie just beginning to form. So I came along here till I met the Geldie, and I followed the Geldie burn down to this junction here, and then from there I spun north, or I suppose north-northeast, to get to Whitebridge, and then cross the River Dee, which comes down from here, and then back on this track all the way back to the car. And that's the end of my point. So I had roughly around 30 kilograms, 30 kilometers of very harsh terrain with steep climbs and quite a lot of pushing, but it worked out quite neatly. It worked out about 10 kilometers each day where I had fairly brutal terrain to cross, either because it was very steep or very high or very bouldery, or a combination of all three. So that's the route, folks. So Mo is also encouraging me to extend this video and do a little bit of a gear loadout. So what I might do is I might, instead of digging everything out of my gear room, I think I might do the lazy approach, and I'll just get the luggage out and I'll tell you what was in each bag and how it was positioned on the bicycle. So if you give me a moment, I'll go and get that sorted. Okay folks, I'm going to try and rattle through this fairly quickly. So what gear do I take when I'm on a cycling tour? Well, I've laid my luggage out just as the way you would find it on my bicycle. I'm going to start up at the handlebars here, so this is not actually the handlebar bag, it's just happens to be the same colour, a wee simulation. So in my handlebar bag, it's a tiny little bag, all I put in there is snacks that I can use to give me energy when I'm on the move. Coming forward of the handlebar bag, attached to the handlebars is my map case. So it's an Ortlieb one, and it ties on, and what I can do with it is I can just flip it forward, and that gives me access to this bag underneath. And in this bag, quite simply, I have my toiletries in there. So if I want to freshen up on the road, I can easily do that. And on this wee bit on the top there, there's one or two little spares that I can access readily, bike spares that is, but more importantly my GPS just slots in there, and with the plastic cover on it I can actually see the GPS as I'm moving along, with the map and the GPS close together. Then on the front forks I've got two cages, one on either side. On one, I'm just using this bag as an example, but on one I usually tie my tent on. My tent fits very nicely onto one fork, and on the other fork, it depends, sometimes I kind of mix it up a little bit, but this is handy for keeping my foul weather gear, keeping my waterproof trousers, gaiters if I'm wanting to carry them, and shell layer jacket. So that goes in there. On my back, I know that a lot of cyclists cringe when I say that I carry things on my back, but in fact I don't carry much weight in here at all. What I tend to do is I have a possibles pouch which has got things like a head torch, first aid kit, wee notebook and pencil, essential equipment, mostly kind of safety related equipment. That can live quite nicely in there. If I'm going to have a sandwich for lunch, I might chuck it in here, and I'll also possibly carry a lightweight thermal layer. So sometimes you'll see that I take off my outer layer, it disappears. Well, it just goes in there. I don't have to open up any of the luggage system on the bag if I'm just regulating temperature. And then I have a seating pad in there that just gives a little bit of padding. Sometimes this bag looks quite bulky on my back, but that's because it's a dry bag. It's an OEX dry bag, and I can trap air in it, and it becomes quite cushioned on my back. The main thing that I put in here, however, is my camera gear, and I put my camera gear on my shoulders because it's one, easily accessible, but two, it gets protected from the worst of the vibration on the bike. So I'm just going to pass that over there, and that takes me to the rear of the bike where all the business end is, where the important stuff is. So it's essentially it's 3 bags that sit like that. So there's a pannier on either side of the back wheel, and there's a rack bag sitting across the top. I'll start with the rack bag, this one here. Now this is an ultra important piece of luggage because this has any dry clothing that I might decide to take with me, and it also has my sleep system. So I have a sleeping bag, a sleeping pad, and if I'm looking for a bit of luxury, I also put a wee inflatable pillow in there. And if I need an extra thermal layer in the evening, it would also go in here. So I have a tendency to carry 2 lightweight thermal layers rather than a heavyweight one. And the reason for that is I can use the lightweight one for cycling in the early morning or late in the evening when it's a bit cooler. But then when I get off the bike and I'm making camp, or in the morning breaking camp, if I'm a wee bit cold, then I can put on the second thermal layer, and they can double up and keep me warm. So that goes in there, and that has to stay waterproof at all times. I should also say that my sleeping bag goes in a dry bag as well, so it's double dry bagged just to make sure. Then in my panniers, panniers are quite simple. In one, I tend to put my tools and spares with my, right in the bottom, with my cook set and general camping gear on the top. So the spares that I carry, generally carry a couple of inner tubes, and then 1 or 2 bits and pieces, mostly that are particular to my own bike or my knowledge of my bike, if I think that there's anything that's likely to fail. And then a fairly basic toolkit. So they go in there. Then an empty Nalgene bottle, so that when I'm at camp I can get loads of water and I don't have to be running backwards and forwards to the burn. I carry a flask on my water bottle cage on the bike so that I can have a cup of coffee during the day, and I carry a water bottle as well with clean water in it. So the flask and the water bottle never get contaminated water, they only get drinking water, whereas the bottle in here, I just go down to the burn and fill it up, and then mostly that water gets boiled for cooking. So all that goes in there. My cook system goes in here, and my stove and gas. I use a titanium cook system, which is pretty lightweight. So although it's quite bulky, there isn't actually a tremendous amount of weight in there, notwithstanding the weight of the inner tubes and bike tools, because they can be a wee bit heavy. On this side, the majority of what goes into this side is my food. And that means that as the journey progresses and I consume the food, then gradually what happens is the cook system transfers from here into that one, but the tools stay in here, and that keeps the bike reasonably well trimmed. That's how it works. It's a really kind of simple setup. It looks big, it looks bulky, but in fact I'm not carrying a tremendous amount of gear. On this particular trip I opted for a wee bit of luxury. I carried, what else did I carry that I didn't really need to take with me? I took an extra stove and a gas canister so that I could have my coffee or tea in the evening whilst I'm cooking up my meal, so I can use 2 stoves together. And I also took a ground sheet that gives me something clean and dry to sit on, and I can slide under the tent if I'm on wet ground. But apart from that, fairly basic and standard setup. Not exactly bike packing, but quite lightweight. Anyway, we've been there for quite a long time. I'm conscious that the intro to this video is fairly long, so I'm just going to roll the video now, folks. Hope you enjoy it. How you doing there, folks? We're going to take the bike for a spin. We'll keep going. I've got quite a big climb coming up, folks, so it's time to lose a layer. There's actually wee flurries of sleety snow when I set off. I'm sitting, having a cup of coffee and a wee bite to eat in the car, watching them dropping down on the windscreen. So I'm heading up this way, keeping Derry Cairngorm there, the pointy one, keeping that on my left. Across the high point, folks.
It's cold and windy and a wee bit wet here. The summit of these Cairngorm hills are in touching distance. I'm quite high up. I need a layer on and I need to change my map. So this is a boulder field that I'm crossing, folks. I was able to cycle from the Beerlach there down a little bit and hit the boulder field. You can see all the big screes coming down on either side from the hills. So it's just with a fully laden bike, it's just not possible to cycle. Actually, even if my bike didn't have the luggage on it, I don't think I would manage it. Oh, I seem to have lost the track. Well folks, that's a grand day, but that's me done. That's as far as I'm going today. Morning folks. It's pretty cold and wet this morning. There's some fresh snow dusting over the high ground there. I didn't check in with you much last night. I was pretty tired, but in fact the camera's died, so I couldn't do any filming anyway. I'm getting all my layers on this morning. I go down to the river there. I'll get some water. A bit of porridge and coffee on the go. Well, can you see that folks? The snow has turned back to rain again. thanks as always for tuning in, folks. Very, very much appreciated. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll get back to you again soon. So bye for now. Stay safe.